The vast, gleaming spires of the Galactic Council station loomed in the distance, an impenetrable fortress of alien design. Its massive walls, riddled with the markings of countless species, seemed to mock the idea that humanity might ever have a place among the stars, let alone be taken seriously in the halls of power. But Captain Aidan Valor wasn't here for approval. He was here to make a point. The USS Indomitable floated in the shadow of the station, its sleek, imposing form barely visible through the shimmering force fields surrounding the docking bay. It was one of the most advanced warships ever built by human hands, a ship designed for a single purpose: to make the galaxy understand the cost of underestimating humanity. And today, the time had come to make that point known. Aidan stood at the bridge of his ship, arms folded across his chest as he watched the station grow larger on the view screen. His crew moved around him with practiced precision, their faces a mixture of pride and anticipation. They had worked for years to bring the Indomitable to life, and now it was time to see it in action. "Captain," Lieutenant Rosa Callahan's voice cut through the tension in the air, her eyes fixed on the console in front of her. "We're receiving a transmission from the Council." Aidan didn't move, his gaze still locked on the station. "Put it through," he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. The screen flickered, and the face of Chancellor Fissar Kivar appeared, his alien features sharp and angular, his eyes glowing with a smug arrogance that Aidan had come to expect from the Council. The Kivar were a long-lived species, their civilization older than humanity's by millennia. They looked down on humans as nothing more than upstarts, their technological progress a mere blip in the grand timeline of the galaxy. "Captain Valor," the Chancellor's voice dripped with condescension, "I trust your arrival is not an attempt to waste our time. We've seen your reports. A new ship. How quaint." Aidan's lips twitched upward slightly. He knew the game. Fissar was baiting him, trying to provoke a reaction. It was a typical tactic, used by the Council to make human diplomats seem petty and irrational. But Aidan wasn't here to play by their rules. "I'm here to show you something, Chancellor," Aidan replied, his tone steady, unwavering. "Something that will make you reconsider what you think you know about humanity." Fissar's eyes narrowed, but he remained composed. "I don't have time for empty posturing, Captain. The Council is not interested in your toys. Bring your ship to the dock, and we'll see how long it lasts in the presence of true power." Aidan could feel the sneer in Fissar's words, the way the Chancellor belittled humanity's achievements. The underestimation stung, but it also fueled his resolve. "Understood, Chancellor. I'll see you soon," Aidan said, cutting the transmission before Fissar could add anything more. He turned to his crew, the finality of his movements setting the tone for what was to come. "Prepare to dock. Let's show them what we're capable of." The Indomitable glided smoothly toward the docking bay, the hum of its engines echoing through the ship as they slowed to a precise halt. The massive doors of the bay opened with a hiss, revealing the glittering expanse of the Galactic Council's station. The human ship barely seemed to fit in the space, its bulk a stark contrast to the sleek, elegant vessels of the Council's members. Aidan stood at the ramp, his boots heavy on the metal floor as he stepped out into the cold, sterile atmosphere of the station. The air smelled faintly of ozone, mixed with the scent of alien materials he couldn't quite place. The Council chambers were a cavernous, circular room, its walls adorned with glowing symbols from dozens of species. At the center of the room stood Fissar Kivar, flanked by several other Council representatives, alien faces whose expressions ranged from curiosity to disdain. Aidan didn't flinch. He knew this moment was coming, and he was prepared. "Captain Valor," Fissar began, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I trust you've come to share your impressive warship with us?" The way he emphasized the word impressive made it clear he didn't believe it. Aidan stepped forward, standing tall before the Council. "Yes, Chancellor, I have. But I think you'll find this one different." A pause. Then, without waiting for permission, Aiden signaled to his communications officer, who activated a holographic display above the center of the room. The hologram flickered to life, revealing a fully scaled image of the Indomitable, its sleek, angular shape, the hardened hull, and the ominous lines of its weapons systems. The room fell silent. Fisser's eyes darted to the image, his lips curling into a dismissive sneer. "I see you've come to impress us with a ship that looks functional," he said. "But it's nothing more than a relic of a bygone age. You waste our time, Captain." Aiden's gaze never wavered. "You don't understand, Chancellor. This ship isn't just a relic. It's humanity's answer to your arrogance. This ship can do things your greatest warships could never dream of." The council members exchanged glances, their skepticism palpable. But Aiden wasn't finished. "You see," he continued, "the Indomitable doesn't rely on conventional tactics. It doesn't fight like your ships do. It adapts. It calculates. And when it strikes with an impact that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about warfare." Fisser's eyes narrowed further, his irritation now mingling with a hint of concern. He clearly hadn't expected this level of defiance from a human. But it was too late to back down now. The die had been cast. "You've made your point, Captain," Fissar said with a forced smile. "But until I see this adaptation of yours in action, I'll remain unconvinced." Aiden nodded slowly. "I'm glad to hear that, Chancellor. Because that's exactly what I came here to show you." As the tension in the room thickened, Aiden's crew stood ready behind him, every man and woman aboard the Indomitable primed for what was to come. The Council had underestimated them, but that mistake was about to cost them more than they could imagine. Aiden's eyes never left Fissar as he spoke his final words. "You'll see, Chancellor. The Indomitable isn't just a ship. It's a statement." The mockery had only just begun. The council room was still silent, the air thick with the weight of unspoken words. Fissar Kiv-Ar stood motionless, his sharp features locked in a mask of stoic arrogance. The other representatives, an assortment of creatures from different corners of the galaxy, exchanged looks, some with skepticism, others with faint amusement. The humans, it seemed, had arrived with a great deal of pride and little understanding of their place in the grand order of the galaxy. Captain Aiden Valor stood at the front of the room, unfazed by the contempt that radiated from every corner. His gaze flicked from Fissar to the other members of the council, sensing the tension in the air. Despite the condescending words, he could feel their uncertainty. Beneath the surface of their mockery, something else was stirring. A sense of unease. Fissar broke the silence first, his voice smooth, cutting through the stillness like a blade. "It seems your presence here today is little more than a distraction, Captain. A show of bravado," he said, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed Aiden's unmoving stance. "If this ship is your ultimate weapon, I must say, I'm unimpressed." Aiden's expression remained unchanged. He had known this moment was coming, he had prepared for it. The Council had never respected humanity, not since their first days of space exploration. Every step forward had been met with derision, with each achievement of theirs brushed aside as insignificant in the face of the Council's centuries-old reign. But that was about to change. "You underestimate us, Chancellor," Aiden said coolly. "You underestimate what humanity is capable of. And that's a mistake." Fisser's lips twitched in amusement. "A mistake? Perhaps. But one I'm willing to make." He turned to the other members of the council, as if Aiden were nothing more than an annoyance. "Shall we proceed with the more important matters, or shall we indulge this display of juvenile arrogance for a while longer?" One of the council members, a hulking insectoid from the world of Zorath, rumbled a low growl. "Enough of this, Fissar. The captain has his ship here, for better or worse. Let's see what it can do." Fissar glanced at the Zorathian, then back at Aiden, dismissing the remark with a flick of his hand. "Very well. Show us then, Captain Valor. Impress us." Aiden stepped forward, signaling to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Callahan. The large holoscreen embedded in the center of the chamber flared to life, casting a blue glow over the assembled council members. The image of the Indomitable returned, but this time, it wasn't a static display. The ship began to move, its powerful engines roaring to life as though the ship itself was flexing its muscles in preparation for battle. "We're not here to impress you, Chancellor," Aiden said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of certainty. "We're here to show you that the game has changed." The Indomitable in the hologram shifted position. Its massive, angular form cut through the void with purpose. The soft whir of its engines filled the air in the room, eerily synchronized with the rising tension. The crew aboard the ship was already preparing for their next move. "What are you showing us?" Fissar sneered, his eyes flicking toward Aiden. "A demonstration of your ability to move a ship? I've seen children perform such tricks with their toys. Are you really suggesting this is your great weapon?" Aiden didn't flinch. "You haven't seen the weapon yet." Before the Chancellor could respond, the hologram flickered again. The Indomitable shifted into a new formation, its hull retracting with mechanical precision, revealing a series of hidden weapon pods, each one housing a weapon more powerful than any the Council had ever encountered. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying, a testament to human ingenuity. Fissar's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, the smug mask cracked. But only for a moment. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice now edged with something that resembled concern. "This," Aiden said, pausing for effect, "is just the beginning." Suddenly, the ship's main cannon, a towering, heavily shielded structure that had remained hidden up until now, emerged from its concealed position, locking into place with an unsettling hum. The chamber felt smaller now, as if the very walls were pressing in. The power of the Indomitable was not just in its size, but in its ability to adapt, to surprise, to outthink its enemies. Aiden turned to Callahan, his voice steady. "Fire a simulation, Lieutenant." Callahan's fingers danced over the console, and a soft beep echoed through the room. The cannon on the Indomitable fired, not in a traditional blast, but in a concentrated, pinpoint beam of energy, slamming into an asteroid in the hologram's simulation. The asteroid shattered into millions of pieces with a sound that rattled through the chamber like distant thunder. A collective gasp rippled through the council members. Fissar's eyes locked onto the screen, his mouth slightly agape. He recovered quickly, but the uncertainty was now visible beneath his practiced indifference. You've turned your ship into a weapon," Fissar said, his voice quieter than before. It wasn't a question. It was an admission. And yet there was still a trace of disbelief in his tone. "But this is still just a display. A show of power, nothing more." Aiden's voice remained calm, but there was an edge now. "I think you're missing the point, Chancellor. The Indomitable isn't just about firepower. It's about flexibility. It's about the ability to think outside the box, to surprise when your opponent least expects it." The council members looked to one another. Some shifted in their seats, uneasy. The insectoid from Zorith rumbled again, his claws tapping the floor. "This is impressive," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Perhaps it's more than just another toy, after all." But Fissar, unwilling to concede any ground, scoffed. "One demonstration doesn't change anything. You've shown us a ship with powerful weapons, Captain. But you've yet to prove it can take on the might of the Council's fleet. And when your Indomitable ship faces our armadas, I suspect it will fall like all the others." Aiden held his gaze, unwavering. "You'll see, Chancellor. You'll all see." The room fell silent again, but this time, the unease was palpable. Fissar's bravado had faltered, and Aiden could see the cracks in the Council's arrogance. The humans were no longer the underdogs they had been dismissed as. But Fissar wasn't done yet. He would never admit to being wrong, not yet. "Very well," he said, his tone cold. "We shall see, Captain. We shall see." And as the council members filed out of the room, Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that, despite the mockery, despite the arrogance, something had shifted. The Indomitable had made its statement. Now, the Council would have to decide if they were willing to pay the price for underestimating humanity. The silence after the Council session was deafening. The sharp, metallic hum of the Indomitable reverberated in the background as Captain Aiden Valor stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. The crew moved quietly, their movements swift, their eyes focused, but there was a collective tension in the air. They had made their statement. Now, the consequences were closing in. Aiden's eyes scanned the holographic display before him, where the dark expanse of space loomed beyond the station's defensive shields. The Indomitable had been carefully maneuvered into position just outside the station's security perimeter. They were close, too close, and yet the Council had made no move to respond. It was as if they were waiting for something, though what, Aiden couldn't be sure. The waiting game had begun. "Captain," Lieutenant Callahan's voice broke through his thoughts. She was at the tactical station, her gaze fixed on her console. "We've detected multiple unidentified ships moving toward our position. They're fast, but it's hard to get an accurate reading." Aiden's eyes narrowed. The Council wouldn't waste any time retaliating. They would send their fleets, their war machines, to remind humanity of its place. It was just a matter of how soon. "Alert the crew. Brace for possible engagement. Prepare all weapon systems," Aiden ordered, his voice calm but sharp. "Callahan, get me a better read on those ships." Rose's fingers flew over the console, her brow furrowed in concentration. "They're getting closer. Too fast for conventional detection systems. They've got advanced cloaking technology, Captain. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Aiden's jaw tightened. He had expected the Council to fight back, but this? He hadn't anticipated this level of sophistication. These weren't just typical warships, they were something else entirely. A soft chime signaled the arrival of a new message. Aiden glanced at the screen, his mind already turning. The message was from the Galactic Council, the very same that had dismissed humanity only hours before. The holographic image of Chancellor Fissar Kivar appeared. His glowing eyes narrowed in a grim expression. "Captain Valor," he said, his voice cold and calculating, "it seems you've misunderstood the nature of this confrontation. We do not take kindly to threats, especially from a species so newly arrived among the stars. Your Indomitable may have impressed some, but now you face the full wrath of the Galactic Council. We will teach you your place in this galaxy." Fissar's words were followed by a long pause, and Aiden could almost hear the smugness in his voice. But there was a twinge of uncertainty there as well, an undertone that betrayed Fissar's growing awareness that the Indomitable was not a mere toy. Aiden leaned forward, his eyes locked on Fissar's hologram. "Chancellor, you made a mistake. Humanity doesn't back down. And the Indomitable isn't just a weapon, it's a message. You can choose to ignore it, but that won't stop it from being heard." The flicker of annoyance was clear in Fissar's eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. "We'll see how long your resolve lasts when you're facing the might of the Council fleet. Prepare yourself, Captain. We'll show you what real power looks like." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge in a heavy silence. Aiden didn't need to hear any more. He knew what was coming. The Indomitable was humanity's first real challenge to the galactic status quo, and the Council wasn't going to let it stand. "Lieutenant," Aiden barked, turning to Callahan, "give me a status report. How long before those ships are on top of us?" 5 minutes at best," Callahan replied, her voice steady, though there was a sharpness in her eyes. "I can't get a full lock on, but their trajectory's clear. They're aiming for us." "Any word from the fleet?" Aiden asked, his voice low, focused. "We're on our own for now, Captain," Callahan answered, glancing over at her communications officer. "No reinforcements from Earth yet. The Indomitable is our only backup." "Then we fight," Aiden said firmly. "We won't let them intimidate us. We show them who we are." The ship shuddered as the first energy blast rocked the hull, sending vibrations up through the deck. Alarms blared, echoing through the ship, but Aiden was already moving. His eyes scanned the tactical readout, assessing the incoming threat. "Shields holding," Callahan reported, her voice steady despite the pressure. The blast was minor. "But they're coming in fast, multiple ship signatures. They're getting ready to fire again." Aiden's mind raced. The Council wasn't just sending one ship, they were sending an entire fleet, and from what he could tell, these weren't just standard warship. These were elite, the best of the best. They had advanced cloaking, specialized weaponry, and tactics refined through centuries of galactic conquest. This wouldn't be an easy fight. "Prepare to engage," Aiden said, turning to his weapons officer. "Target their lead ship. Let's show them the true power of the Indomitable." The Indomitable's weapons systems came to life with a low hum, its powerful armament locking onto the enemy ship. Aiden watched as the targeting reticle zeroed in on the lead vessel, an imposing, angular craft that looked capable of obliterating anything in its path. "Firing main cannon," the weapons officer shouted. The bridge rumbled as the ship's primary weapon discharged, sending a beam of concentrated energy slicing through the void. The enemy ship didn't stand a chance. The beam hit its shield and, with a burst of energy, the shield failed, allowing the beam to tear through the ship's hull. The explosion was massive, lighting up the dark expanse of space as the enemy ship disintegrated in a shower of debris. Aiden didn't allow himself a moment of victory. The battle was just beginning, and they were outnumbered. "Other ships are moving in," Callahan said. "We've only taken out one. They're regrouping for a counterattack." Aiden's eyes never left the tactical screen. "Target their second ship, concentrate fire. I want their shields down before they can engage us properly." The Indomitable shifted, its powerful thrusters adjusting its position in the chaos of battle. The second enemy ship moved in, weapons primed, ready to strike. But the Indomitable was faster, more maneuverable. The weapons fire from the enemy ship missed, the blasts searing past them as Aiden barked orders, guiding his crew through the battle with precision. "Fire!" he ordered, and once again, the Indomitable's weapons delivered another devastating blow, taking out a second ship. But as the second ship exploded, Aiden's heart sank. More ships were closing in. The odds were beginning to shift in the Council's favor, but he wasn't about to let it end here. "All hands brace for impact," Aiden commanded. "This fight isn't over." He wasn't going to lose, not today. The battle had escalated. The Indomitable was now locked in the heart of a ferocious firefight with the fleet of the Galactic Council. Aiden Valor stood at the bridge, his knuckles white as he gripped the rail in front of him. His crew moved with fluid precision, the ship responding to his every command, but the reality of the situation was undeniable. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and the enemy fleet was closing in fast. "Captain, their reinforcements are arriving," Lieutenant Callahan reported, her voice steady but tinged with tension. "2 more fleets coming in from the outskirts. They're coming in hot, and they're targeting our weak points." Aiden nodded, his mind racing. The Indomitable shields were holding, but only just. They had already lost 2 enemy ships, but the enemy's numbers were overwhelming. He needed to act fast. He had to think of a way to even the odds. "Deploy decoys," Aiden ordered. "Activate the cloaking drones. I want them to think we're pulling back." The tactical officer, Lieutenant Vasquez, quickly set the commands into motion. Several smaller cloaking drones shot out from the ship's hangars, deploying in a spread pattern around the Indomitable. The ships surrounding them would now be focused on the decoys, giving the Indomitable a precious window to escape, or, better yet, to launch a counterattack. "Decoys are deployed, Captain," Vasquez confirmed. "The enemy fleet is beginning to take the bait. They're splitting their forces." "Good," Aiden muttered, but his mind remained sharp. The Council wasn't just sending ships, they were sending fleets, full of elite warship. He needed a way to hit back, to make them rethink their strategy. He wasn't going to let this be the end of humanity's first major stand in the galaxy. "Prepare the secondary weapon systems," Aiden said, his eyes locking onto the tactical map as the enemy fleet scattered around the decoys. "We have one shot at this." The crew moved with purpose, and the indomitable systems hummed to life once more. The primary cannon was recharging, but Aiden knew that they needed more than brute force. It was time for a different approach. Aiden turned to Callahan. "Get me a lock on their flagship," he ordered. "The one in the center. We need to take out their command ship." Callahan's fingers danced over the console, her eyes scanning the incoming data. "Locked on. But their shields are reinforced. A direct hit with the main cannon won't be enough." "We don't need a direct hit," Aiden replied, the hint of a plan forming. "Fire a focused pulse from the auxiliary cannons. Target their shield generators." Callahan's eyes widened slightly in understanding. "You're thinking of disrupting their shields before we fire the main cannon." "Exactly," Aiden said, his tone grim. "We'll disable their defenses long enough for a killing blow." The tactical team keyed in the commands, and the auxiliary cannons began to charge. The ship's forward-facing weaponry rotated into position, their barrels aligning with the flagship. Aiden's focus was absolute as the seconds stretched into eternity. If they failed, they would be overwhelmed. If they succeeded, they would hit the heart of the Council's fleet. "Ready to fire on your mark, Captain," Vasquez said, his eyes fixed on the tactical readouts. Aiden's gaze never left the enemy flagship, the larger warship now directly in their sights. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. If they failed this strike, the battle would be lost. "Fire!" The indomitable secondary cannons roared to life, sending a precise pulse of energy toward the enemy ship's shields. The pulse hit with pinpoint accuracy, causing the flagship to shudder as its energy barriers flickered and collapsed. The feedback crackled across the comms as the enemy fleet began to scramble, realizing what was happening. "They're destabilizing!" Callahan shouted. "Shields are down for the flagship. Their core systems are exposed." Aiden wasted no time. "All hands brace for impact. Fire the main cannon, full power." The massive cannon on the Indomitable discharged in an explosive burst, sending a concentrated beam of energy surging through the void. It struck the flagship dead center, tearing through the weakened hull and sending shockwaves of energy radiating outward. The ship's core exploded with a deafening roar, the resulting shockwave cascading through the surrounding ship. "Target destroyed," Vasquez confirmed, his voice filled with awe. "The flagship is gone." Aiden stood motionless for a moment, allowing the enormity of their victory to sink in. The Council's flagship, the heart of their command structure, was destroyed, and with it, the entire fleet had been thrown into disarray. But the battle wasn't over yet. "Captain, we're getting multiple enemy signatures closing in," Callahan warned. "The other fleets are regrouping. We've drawn their attention." Aiden didn't hesitate. "Prepare to engage with everything we've got. We'll fight until we have no choice but to fall back." The crew sprang into action, manning their stations with unwavering focus. Aiden's mind was already several moves ahead, calculating their next step. The Indomitable had dealt a devastating blow, but the enemy was far from finished. He needed to buy them time, to force the Council to reconsider. "Deploy the mines," Aiden ordered, his voice calm but heavy with purpose. "Set them to activate on proximity. I want the enemy fleet to feel the full force of this retaliation." The mines deployed, floating silently into the space between them and the oncoming enemy ship. Aiden watched as the enemy began to close in, unaware of the hidden threat waiting in the void. And then, with a sudden jolt, the enemy fleet entered the minefield. The first wave of ships exploded violently, their shields unable to withstand the powerful blast. The mines tore through their hulls with terrifying precision, sending several ships into a chain reaction of destruction. "Captain, the mines are doing the job," Callahan reported, a note of relief in her voice. "They've taken out at least 3 ships, and several others are heavily damaged." Aiden nodded grimly. The tide was shifting, but they still weren't out of danger. The remaining enemy ships were still closing in, their weapons primed and ready to strike. The Indomitable was battered, its shields barely holding, and its resources were rapidly running out. "Keep firing, Lieutenant," Aiden said, his voice steely with determination. "We keep pushing. They can't win if we don't let them." The next few minutes were a blur of activity, a relentless exchange of fire between the Indomitable and the remaining Council ships. The crew worked in perfect synchronization, each member doing their part to keep the ship in fighting shape. But Aiden knew they couldn't last forever. Eventually they would have to retreat or worse. The thought gnawed at him, but he shoved it aside. For now, they fought on. As the battle raged around them, Aiden's mind was fixed on one goal: survival. It was clear that the Council was not going to let humanity simply exist in the galaxy. But the Indomitable had proven one thing: humans would not go down without a fight. They would make their mark, no matter the cost. And as the enemy forces began to scatter, retreating in the face of humanity's newfound resolve, Aiden allowed himself a brief moment of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning. The Indomitable hung in space, battered but unbroken. The aftershocks of the battle still rippled through the hull, a constant reminder of the ferocity of the fight. Aiden Valor stood at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the distant stars, his face grim but resolute. The enemy fleet had retreated, but he knew this was not a victory in the traditional sense. The war was far from over. "Captain," Lieutenant Callahan's voice broke through his thoughts. "Scanners are picking up multiple ships leaving the system. The Council's fleet is regrouping in the outer rim." Aiden nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. The battle had ended, but the real question now was what came next. The Galactic Council would not take this defeat lightly. Humanity's act of defiance would echo across the galaxy, and they would answer. He had no illusions about the Council's next steps. They would come, with all the power they could muster, and they would expect humanity to bow. But Aiden refused to let that happen. The Indomitable had proven something. It had proven that humanity wasn't just a footnote in the galaxy. They could fight, and they could win. "Prepare for any potential counterstrike," Aiden ordered, his voice steady. "We've got a window, but not much of one." The crew moved swiftly, checking the systems, running diagnostics. The Indomitable had taken a beating. Shields were down to 30%, and several critical systems were offline. But they had survived, and survival was a victory in itself. Aiden knew they had to keep moving forward, to capitalize on the momentum they had gained. If they stayed in this system too long, they would become a target again, easy prey for the Council's remorseless war machine. "Captain, we've received a message," Vasquez said from the communications station. "It's from Earth." Aiden raised an eyebrow. "Put it through." The hollow communications array flickered to life, and the image of General Stanton appeared. The grizzled officer looked older than Aiden remembered, his face lined with years of responsibility and tension. Behind him, the faint hum of Earth's military command center was audible, and the room was dimly lit, casting long shadows across Stanton's features. "Captain Valor," Stanton's voice was grave. "We've been monitoring the situation. The Council is already preparing a retaliatory strike. You've bought us some time, but it's not enough. We need a strategy, and we need it now." Aiden nodded, though his mind was working furiously. "We've hit them hard, General. Their flagship is gone, and we've damaged their fleet. But we can't expect that to hold. They'll come at us again, and they won't stop until they break us." Stanton's gaze was steady. "What's your plan, Captain?" "We need to go on the offensive," Aiden said, his voice resolute. "We have to hit them while they're still reeling from the loss. If we can strike at their supply lines, destabilize their support infrastructure, we can slow them down long enough to get reinforcements and regroup." Stanton's lips tightened into a thin line. "You're suggesting a deep strike into Council territory. That's a suicide mission, Valor." "I'm suggesting we hit them where it hurts," Aiden replied. "We need to make them understand that if they want to take us down, it will cost them more than they're willing to pay." The Indomitable can't take another full-scale engagement, but it can strike fast and hard. We take out their logistics, their supply depots, and leave them scrambling. We'll disrupt their ability to maintain their war machine. The silence between them stretched as Stanton considered the plan. You're asking for a lot, Aiden, Stanton finally said. But you're right. We can't just wait for the Council to come to us. We have to make them think twice about their next move. Aiden's eyes flicked over the crew on the bridge, who were listening intently to the conversation. He knew what this meant. This was no longer just about one ship or even one battle. It was about a new kind of war. Humanity was no longer on the defensive. They were taking the fight to the heart of the galaxy. We'll need to move quickly, Aiden said, turning back to Stanton. I'll gather the crew and get the Indomitable ready to jump into position. We have to strike before they can regroup. You'll have our support, Captain, Stanton said, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. Make it count. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. The crew worked tirelessly, running drills, checking every system, and recalibrating the ship's sensors and weapons for the upcoming mission. The mood was somber but focused. Everyone knew the stakes. Captain, Lieutenant Callahan said, her voice cutting through the noise of the bridge. We've identified several key supply depots located in the outskirts of Council-controlled space. If we hit them, we can significantly hinder their ability to launch another large-scale attack. Aiden glanced at the holomap, his mind already moving. Are they heavily guarded? Not heavily, but there's a risk of running into a patrol, Callahan replied. We'll have to be quick and precise. If we engage them head-on, we'll be in a world of trouble. Then we don't engage them head-on, Aiden said, a flicker of a plan forming in his mind. We use the element of surprise. We come in from the blind spot, take out their perimeter defenses, and hit the depot fast. We'll be in and out before they even realize what happened. You're suggesting a stealth strike? Callahan asked, arching an eyebrow. Exactly, Aiden said. We've got the tech, and we've got the speed. We can do this. The crew moved into action, prepping the stealth protocols and making sure the Indomitable was in optimal condition for a quick, surgical strike. Aiden's mind was sharp, every decision calculated, every movement a piece of a larger puzzle. They would need precision, coordination, and speed. As the Indomitable slid into position, Aiden took one last look at the view of space beyond the bridge. This was their moment. If they could pull this off, it would be a game-changer, a statement that humanity was not going to be subjugated. They had made their mark in the galaxy, and now it was time to make the Council pay for underestimating them. All systems ready, Captain, Callahan reported. Aiden nodded, his eyes hardening with resolve. Then let's make history. The Indomitable engaged its stealth systems and powered up its engines. The next few moments would determine everything. Would the gamble pay off, or would this be their final act? The answer was just a few light years away.